So our next speaker here is Seamus Fagan. Seamus Fagan is a Senior Research Officer in the Department's Regional Veterinary Laboratory in Athlone. Seamus is a 1990 UCD veterinary graduate and he worked in mixed practice in Roscommon before joining the Department of Agriculture. Seamus, along with Marissa Sheehan and Kilkenny RVL, have had a leading role in getting the routine blood testing of lambs at slaughter for more prompt surveillance of annual fluke incidences. And this is a real life example of how we won't call it real-time information, but more readily available information can be made available to help farmers with their management decisions. So Seamus is going to talk us through a number of interesting cases that were submitted to Athlone Regional Veterinary Lab. So over to you, Seamus.
Thank you, Damien. Just to kick off, on the first screen here, I'm showing, I think health and disease, they're two sides of the same coin. And outside that, then you have, to me, a framework that I use when I'm trying to look at whether the health and disease status of a flock. To me, it's always a combination of the environment, the host. In this case, we're talking about sheep as the hosts, and then the microbiome. I call that the microbiome now. Some people originally on that slide, I had pathogens, but I think pathogen paints too negative of a picture of how much we need to work with the microbiome nowadays. And often it's the interaction of the environment and the host that decides whether something is just part of the microbiome or is a pathogen. And Pasteurellas in sheep are a very good example of that, where a lot of sheep carry Pasteurellas, but if the environment and the host, the sheep themselves, are in good, healthy condition, Pasteurella will not cause problems. I suppose the joys of going last is that most people have, we've got a lot of very good information so far, and a lot of the things that I might have covered are already covered. I've just moved this slide high up on my screen because, to me, body condition scoring, it's a very, very crucial tool in good management of a flock for lots of reasons. One of them obviously being to allow the early identification of iceberg diseases. The important thing with body condition scoring is not the average in your flock, but how many fall into each category. So it's the number, if you have too many thin sheep or too many fat sheep, or it's not the average over the flock, it's the number in each category that's important. And just noticed today in practice in the UK, Recognizing and Dealing with Ill Thrift in Ewes, a very good article by Valentina Bussin. I think, regular body condition scoring is a management tool that all sheep farmers should be using. It should be used regularly, and it gives really good information that's very simple to ascertain. Pregnancy scanning then ties into that, but I also think it's very important that sometimes people only pen ewes according to the number that the lambs are carrying, but it's also important to try and pen them according to their body condition score. So if you have 100 ewes carrying doubles, well, maybe they're going into 3 different pens, but then you should try and pen the ewes that are in the lower body condition, 30 of them together. They can get a bit more feed. The ones that are in a slightly higher body condition score then can be penned together, and then the ones that maybe are carrying a little bit too much can be penned together, and they can be fed accordingly, maybe slightly less. Keeping good records is vital on any farm, and sheep farmers no different. When we're talking about flock health, recording how many sheep die and how many lambs die each year. At a minimum, you should be recording the age of them when they die, and try and determine the major cause of death in your flock. So it can be something very simple. Maybe in the lambing shed you have up a whiteboard and you just put down a mark on it each time a lamb dies, And if you want to go a little bit further, maybe you put a couple of big categories together, like scour, you know, trauma, hard lambing or something. You can just tick under different columns each time a lamb dies, and it's very valuable information then when, as Michael and others have alluded to, you're trying to put together a flock health plan for the following year. That information is key to it. It also lets you set key performance indicators for flock health, and you can target management decisions to improve flock health. This improves the profitability and welfare of your flock. This slide shows the major causes of death. This is a study carried out in conjunction with 33 sheep farmers in Ireland in 2016, along with help from Teagasc. The 11 flocks from around Kilkenny RVL, 11 from around Athlone RVL, and 11 from Sligo RVL. And the farmers submitted all the sheep and lambs that died on the farm for a full calendar year. It gave us some very, very good information. And I have to say the farmers that were involved were really, really bought into it. And especially as most mortality occurs around by far the busiest time of the sheep farming, which is that lambing, we were very grateful to how much they bought into it. And the very top cause of death there is bacteremia, septicemia. They're just widespread infections. A lot of these would be in baby lambs, but they can affect any age. But they do go back to showing, you know, iceberg diseases. They don't necessarily, the animal may not die of the iceberg disease, but if she's a ewe that has an underlying condition, maybe she doesn't produce good colostrum, or her lamb is born weak or underweight, and these all greatly contribute to the likelihood that he'll die of bacteremia or septicemia. So it's going back, I suppose, to that very first slide, that another thing that iceberg disease has allowed to happen is if you have a lamb born underweight from an iceberg disease ewe, and it also maybe gets poor quality colostrum, it really becomes an absolute multiplier of any bugs that do happen to be in the area. And that may cause a bug to go from what I would call being part of the microbiome to now being a pathogen, just by the sheer numbers that's now in the environment due to the underlying iceberg conditions. And it only takes a few sheep in your flock to absolutely multiply to have the weak lambs that absolutely multiply this, and then something like E. coli scour, you know, your lambs are being born into a completely different environment. Pneumonia then is the second highest one, and obviously tied into two of the iceberg diseases very strongly, and then enteritis. But we can go down through the list. You can see the different things that we found in them 33 flocks that caused the different causes of ill health in sheep. This is an earlier slide Chris showed of OPA, the outside of the lung. This is a slice through the lung, and you can see this white dark part. The OPA causes the tissue to become like a gland, and no oxygen can then transfer into the bloodstream, and eventually the ewe dies from asphyxia, or if she doesn't die from something like Pasteurella. But again, it's the iceberg disease has changed the environment and the host immunity to allow something like Pasteurella that might normally be a problem to become a problem. This is the trachea, or the windpipe of a sheep. This is something, these are lungworm, something we don't normally associate with sheep. This would be much more common to see in cattle that die of Who's pneumonia, but they do occur again also in sheep. And I can tell by the small bit of wool that this is a sheep. But again, this shows that under the right environment conditions, or if the host immunity has been compromised in some way, that something that wouldn't normally be a problem can become a big problem on your farm. The next slide is something that I think is often underestimated on farms, and that's teeth problems. Most farmers are very familiar with looking at front teeth, but examining back teeth. And they're, after all, in ruminants, the back teeth are the one that really do the heavy lifting, because they do all the chewing and the breaking down of the grass or the forage. And we often underestimate it is very hard to check in a live yaw inside the mouth what's going on with the back teeth. But it is simple enough to run your hand along both jaw bones and also at the top. And the advantage of having two jaw bones is often when you compare them, if you notice something different, then that'll often be a tooth abscess or something. In this case, you can see the gap here in the teeth, and maybe not well, but when I cut through with a saw down here, there's a big abscess here in the bone. When that animal was alive, you would feel this lump here on the jawbone. So if you're happy enough that your nutrition, the parasite control, things like that are under control on your farm, and you're still having a lot of thin sheep, it's always worth checking the teeth out. Biosecurity, as Minister Hackett said, tomorrow they'll be launching the National Farmed Animal Biosecurity Strategy. Just some very quick pointers here. People talk about having a closed flock. Very few people have one. In cattle a few years ago, of the farmers that were asked, something like 80% said they had a closed herd, but a very quick check on AIM, which is the Department of Agriculture's animal movement system, quickly showed that over 3/4 of them didn't actually have a closed herd. So in this case, I've just highlighted a couple of the very quickly, people buy rams, they buy replacements, maybe they bring animals to a mart and they bring them home again. They're sharing equipment, let it be shearing, trailers, slurry spreading, etc. Proper use of quarantine is very important. And as Michael has already said, a flock health plan. Tim Keady, a colleague of Michael's, there was a survey done for Eurosheep recently, and the #1 request both in Ireland and across Europe from sheep farmers and advisors was for more information on the proper use of flock health plans. That's just a result of that survey, so you can see the other things that were on it, and clearly at the top was the flock health plan. So just to conclude, body condition score regularly as part of a flock health plan. Group your sheep with low body condition scores. Investigate why these sheep have low body condition scores. So we need to check for the common things such as nutrition, lameness, parasites, teeth, mastitis, etc. And if none of them are the answer, then you need to, with help from your vet and your advisor, investigate whether iceberg diseases are present in your flock. Michael quoted Marissa saying, know what is going on in your flock, and that's very important. It was put to me in a slightly different way by a very good sheep farmer. He said, never let a dead sheep go to waste. And by that he meant that by submitting it to the regional labs or getting your vet or someone to have a look at it, even though that sheep has died, in the long run, it really helps you to prevent problems in the future. So we're just back to me, this framework on how everything needs to work together. And that's all. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Seamus. I think in coming last, you may have pulled a lot of the strands together for the evening. So thanks very much for a very good presentation. I think that element of the environment, the host and the microbiome, it's something we can keep revisiting for all species, and it's very important that all those elements come together for either health or disease to happen. And I think you did a good job of emphasizing the importance of body condition scores as a management tool, and the importance of records in setting the scene for your flock health program. And I love that last quote there about never letting a dead sheep go to waste. So a bit like never waste a good crisis.